it's your boy Young Love. I give him that time. Pancho leg stand and punchy America. Banyi doll, Pancho leg stand and punchy America. Banyi doll, ban walk on your leg. Kankaro water no watching. Oga level leg, gear power, leg. Panda with ya, punchy America. Panya doll, no chingatongo pandon could you buy a check out. Paku panda gear, what ya be doll venting. Stand and punchy America, Banyi doll, Pancho leg stand and punchy America, Banyi doll, walk on your leg, Kankaro water no watching, Oga level leg, gear power, leg, Panda with ya, punchy America, Panya doll, Chingatongo pandon, could you buy a check out, Paku panda gear, what ya be doll venting.
Thank you so much to our viewers, wherever you are tuning in. Thank you for your time, and you're welcome to Lake State Media Beyond Boundaries. And in the studio with us is our usual guest, as many of you may be familiar with Mr. Edmund Yakani, the CEO of SEPO. And Mr. Edmund Yakani is here today to talk to South Sudanese and also update us about the crisis going on, or the ongoing crisis in Pibor Administrative Area. And it is very sad indeed that we, as South Sudanese, we don't escape a single month without clashes or killing of innocent civilians. It is so sad indeed that we are receiving reports that many people have been killed, homes and villages have been burned to ashes. And it is indeed unfortunate that at this critical time of Christmas, where everyone was supposed to enjoy Christmas period and also the New Year with smiling face and in peace, it's unfortunate that another human being is also inflicting pain upon you or yourself. To everyone who is watching us, I wish you on behalf of Lake State Media, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in advance. Up to this juncture, if you are tuning in now, kindly I'm requesting you to share this live show on your Facebook wall for other people to benefit from the knowledge and the updates from our guest, Mr. Edmund Yakani. Kindly, Mr. Edmund, the floor is yours. Give us your opening remark, and then we move in to the topic of the day. Thank you, Edmund.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity. Merry Christmas to everyone who is listening and to everyone who is watching us. I don't say Merry Christmas. We celebrated well. It's one of the first Christmas where we have registered positive records in terms of the 10 states. At least all the 8 states have reported less crime. Juba have scored 0 crime and incidents during the Christmas. And I work with an organization that keep observing the behaviors of our soldiers when they deploy to protect us. At least we have seen now low misbehaviors or misconduct from the law enforcement agencies for the first time. They have shown discipline. So I think that's a bit of indication that we have celebrated our Christmas very well. And that's why we made a statement in iRadio that at least the political leaders of the country should reward their soldiers with something to their pockets so they can go and celebrate with their families, because when they're offering us protection, as we're sleeping in our houses, they're on the streets, ensuring that there's no criminals who take advantage of people's joy for the Xmas. So I'd like to say, yeah, Christmas celebrate well across the country. We're okay. Of course, prices are still high, and you know the reasons why prices are high is because of the political situation in the country. But yeah, wish you Merry Christmas and hope that in advance also wish you a Happy New Year, and hope that 2023 will be a year of peace and stability. The only things that which is worst with us that this December become another second dark December, more or less like the 2013 December. But 2013 is more darker than what we have now, but still this one have registered a very bad record in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the end of this December. The level of loss of lives of civilians is very high. So yeah, there, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Edmund, for also letting us know the situation during Christmas period in Juba. And if that is the case, then we can register this Christmas as the first ever Christmas in Juba being celebrated without any loss of life. And I know some minor issues are always there, but the level of loss of life in each and every Christmas period is what matters. But this year, seems Juba is so quiet and secure, and we can give appreciation to our men in uniform for exercising their duties. And we even saw on Facebook people dancing around these 7 days roundabout between Gudele and Bilpam, Custom and Wazaret. It was a good thing for the citizen to dance on the street, and it was a good thing for children to barefooted from Chirikat all the way to Nyakuren Cultural Center and go back in the evening in peace. That is what citizens need. They don't need anything. They just need their life to be safe, their property to be safeguarded, and to have basics need. We appreciate them for that. Mr. Edmund, we have received a lot of reports for the last 2 to 3 weeks in regard to the conflict going on in Pibor Administrative Area. As somebody who is always attached to the community or communal violence, cattle rating, and also when it comes to the political differences, you are always there under the umbrella of SEPO. Kindly, can you let us know or update the public? What are the new updates? And also give us the statistics. Sometimes the statistics on Facebook, most of them are sometimes manipulated and they cannot be accurate. They can either be less or they can be more. But because by the fact that you are the head of SEPO, and SEPO is present in each and every 10 state plus 3 administrative areas, you might be having a factual statistics of the life lost for the last 3 to 2 weeks, and it is still ongoing as we speak. And you will also give us the updates on what are the modality, excuse me, what are the modality being laid down by the government of South Sudan, especially the central government, in order to neutralize such situation, despite the message which was taken out of context during the president remarked that the war in Upper region is unstoppable. And on the same note, as the president of the nation, everything is under his control. Whether he will manage it or not, citizens expect him to perform his duty, and then the rest will be left for the God, or be left for the God and the citizens themselves. Mr. Edmond, I yield it back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. With the violence that is going on, as you have spoke, the country is experiencing 3 pockets of violence as we speak now. We have the fast blowing one, which have subsided somehow, is the Upper Nile region violence that we have seen it and have subsided. It subsided simply because it has taken a lot of international attention, and that's why the warlords that are there are afraid. And Upper Nile region is suffering from what we call sponsored defections and turning those sponsored defections into a proxy war in Upper Nile. So that have subsided, but I'll talk about later towards the conclusion. And the emerging ones which are now drawing attention is the incident in Mangala, which is between the pastoralists and the host community of Mangala, which is both Bari and Mundari, and the hot burning one. It is the movement that youth were mobilized from the Low Nuer section, and then Duk, and then even some youth from Bor have joined, and they march to Gumuruk of Greater Pibor Administrative Area, and they overran Gumuruk from the control of the government. So they kicked out SSPDF, all the government securities were kicked out, plus the armed youth of the Murle, and atrocities were massively committed in Gumuruk. So let me start with the Gumuruk one, that the youth were mobilized. What is the trigger? The trigger for this particular incident was, if you remember, when Upper Nile was burning, there was huge marching of White Army to confront with the Agwelek. And if you talk of the White Army, it's really the mobilization of the Nuer through the spiritual leader, who you call as Dakweth, which runs from Akobo, you go up to that side of Fangak, when they're confronting the Agwelek in Upper Nile. And I think that moment when they went there, some few criminal-minded Murle, and specifically, I don't consider the whole Pibor is a problematic when it comes to this particular issue. It is some section in Gumuruk and a village called Nanam. And those are the areas where there's no rule of law. So they came and then they raided and adopted children around Duk and some parts of the Low Nuer. So that particular incident, when the crisis in Upper Nile subsided and the White Army returned back, they start mobilizing the others to join them. And of course, White Army is in the dominance of the numbers that march to Gumuruk, and then aided by a bit reasonable number of youth from Duk, and then some few from Bor. And of course, White Army in the front. And who is really leading them? On the top of their command structure is the spiritual leader, Dakweth, which lead them. And they overran Gumuruk. Their attack start on 26, and they end up taking Gumuruk from the government control. It is on 28th, or actually 28th yesterday. Is much more proper, they control Gumuruk, but 27 they overran Gumuruk. Then in the incident of the clashes over the control of Gumuruk from the government and its fall, if I can say, or the kick out of the government by the White Army dominance. And of course, as I said, there's a part of non-White Army youth who are mainly from Duk and some part of Bor, and I think there's a little amount of Anuak. Over that crisis, the registered statistics of death is 56 as per the date of yesterday, 27th. That's the registration. And that's a head count that was done physically in the town. Forget about the villages, people who died in the villages, and people who might have died because of crossfire, and they might have not died at spot, they might have died somewhere. Those numbers are counted. So our estimation is that the death may go over 80 persons that were killed, because physically we're able to count 56, and the numbers keep on increasing. Sometimes you can hear 57, some 51, but that's the numbers. So numbers may go over that. Estimatedly, it may reach to 100, but 80 is a high possibility that we may count. If the date of today, the statistics are finished, it may reach to 80. Livelihood was completely destroyed. Infrastructure in terms of the tukuls as a right of adequate standard were burned down. So the whole Gumuruk town was completely brought to ashes by the White Army. And SSPDF have lost soldiers, and I think SSPDF have lost over 10 soldiers who during the confrontation with the White Army. The White Army are well equipped and well mobilized compared to the SSPDF. They were able to kick the SSPDF out of Gumuruk. And as we speak per now, SSPDF are in direct confrontation with the White Army, because the White Army want to pursue their way to reach up to Pibor town, and SSPDF is preventing them, but also SSPDF is getting back to control Gumuruk, and that is officially confirmed by the statement made by the spokesperson of the army, Lulroy, that they are now in a direct confrontation with the White Army. So the White Army are really well equipped and well empowered in terms of equipment and bullets. And that brings to the question, who supplies them? Where is the source of supply coming from? So, and that is where the element of that the spiritual leaders, both in Jongole and Pibor, need to be held accountable. Not all of them. In Jongole, the particular spiritual leaders is Duckworth. He is always a mobilizer of youth that goes towards championing extremism and violence and violation of human rights. And of course, he is responding to the continuous misbehaviors that are coming from our brothers and sisters, Murle, with regard to continuous adopting of children in big numbers, either 10, 12, 5, and then women, and then continuous cattle raiding. And it's not the whole Murle, as I say. It is a section of criminal-minded Murle. And mainly these are the one controlled by another section of chiefs in Greater Pibor Administrative Area called Red Chiefs. And these Red Chiefs are in a place called Nanam and some parts of Gumuruk. And those areas, there's no rule of law, there's no police, there's no government actually. They are the government, the Red Chiefs there in Nanam. So it's a group of a clique of criminal-minded Murle who expose the whole Greater Pibor Administrative Area for the risk of consistent adopting children and women. And the failure is a government failure from national level and then a sub-national level in the name of Jongole State and Pibor Administrative Area, because they don't have the power to impose rule of law. So in particular, the clash that is going on between the Murle and the youth from Lounwer and Dinka from Jongole is a clear indicator of breakdown in the rule of law. There's absence of rule of law there. People are really living with jungle law. Impunity is like a normal thing. People can kill, you can adopt, you can run. Nobody can ask you, nobody can trace. So there's no presence of government control. And the clear indicator now, when you see the overrunning, the White Army overrunning Gumuruk from the control of the government. So that is the statistics that we have. So we have 56, which I tell, as I say, by now is 80 death, and over, we're expecting by the end of the month may go over 80 persons death. We have over, right now, as we know, statistics that we have over 70 wounded. And these 70 wounded are those who are reported and accounted. So there's so many people who are wounded who might have run in hiding. They're not counted. So wounded may be over hundreds. If you have death like around 80, then wounded may be close to the number of 80 plus, it's half. That means with 100 plus something wounded people. Then you have over 100,000 displaced persons, and they're in dire need of what? Of humanitarian assistance, and their livelihood has been destroyed. So they don't have a coping mechanism in terms of livelihood. But also they're displaced in an area where accessibility is problematic. So it means humanitarians have to redesign response, and that response may not be an immediate. It may take either 5 to 1 week for them to respond. And it means somehow here, starvation will be used as a weapon of war against the civilian population, like what has happened in Upper Nile, where the forces who are fighting the proxy war use starvation against the Cholok, squeeze them to a place where there's water, they die out of malaria, no access to medication, no access to food. You have children, you have lactating mother, kids die because they couldn't get milk from the breast of the mother, elderly died because they don't get the meals that require for their physical fitness, sick people die because they don't have meals. So that's why starvation is being used as a weapon of war, which is a new pattern, by the way, that South Sudanese need to realize that now South Sudanese start using starvation as a weapon of war, which is very terrible and which is inhuman. It's really inhuman. It's painful when you use starvation as a weapon of war. So that is where the Pibor situation is. So in Pibor town, people are panicking, people are migrating, but of course, SSPDF is calling, and even Jongole leadership, the spokesperson of the government of Jongole, which is the Minister of Information, Samuel, have made an official statement calling the national government to respond. So national government response is a bit weak. Why? Because there's a pockets of violence that national government have to use proper utilization of the forces. And remember, the graduated unified forces until now are not properly redeployed. Why? Because we have pending graduation in unity, which is consistently being postponed more than 5 or 6 times. I don't know why they continue postponing the graduation unified forces in Bentiu. So with that graduation of the unified forces in Bentiu, redeployment may not be easy. But of course, they have used redeployment forces in some areas like Tonj, when there's a crisis, and then areas like Twitch and Ngok unified forces were used there, contributing from the graduated forces. So you need to have a proper deployment of unified forces. But for me, even if you deploy how many soldiers to the ground, as long as there's absence of rule of law institutions on the ground, the White Army are the government. There's nobody there government in the terms of the Lounwer. Neither the government from the side of the IEG, neither the government from the side of the IO is in control of the White Army. The White Army are everything. They are the driving force. They just look like you are in Somalia. You know, and the way how the Somalian militias operates, it's the same way how like our White Army operates. They protect themselves because there's absence of rule of law, there's absence of government. So they become the government, alternatively, that controls everything. So White Army can tell you, go, we don't want you, they don't want you. They say stay, you will stay. So it depends on how much White Army likes you and how much you work with White Army. And of course, the White Army, who are they? These are young people below age of 30. They don't mobilize. The concept of humanity, the concept of human rights, actually for them, it is a social prestige for you to go and show your neighbor the strength that you can fight. Whether you come alive or you will die, they don't care. What we want to show is that we go in massive numbers. And even death in that particular process, it's a celebration. It's not a death. You don't count it like somebody have died. Like we have lost one of our family member in the struggle to register history of controlling Gumuruk. Of course, the death from also the side of the White Army is not yet counted because nobody can count that. But also they have lost lives over 20. So we are estimating our numbers that per our statistics of control, which we need to verify, is that over 30 youth from the White Army have lost their life in control of Gumuruk. So still those numbers not counted, and they might have massive number of wounded. But of course, this is statistics need to be confirmed officially. But these are still numbers that we are watching through our early warning system that we have deployed behind this particular violence. So that is a situation, people. At a vital level, atrocities were committed, and those atrocities, honestly and sincerely to all South Sudanese, wherever you are, they describe crime against humanity elements. Children were killed, elderly were killed, disabled people were killed, sick people were killed, women were raped, starvation was used as a weapon. Food is, by starvation, it means food has been destroyed, food has been burned out, the crops that are coming, it's cleared off so that they don't have, if they are to leave Gumuruk, there's no harvest, people have to continue starvation, and humanitarian access under the control of Gumuruk by the White Army is not going to be easy because they are not formal institutions that you need to negotiate with them and certain conventional approach. They are really malicious. Their governance structure is very tough. Anybody can easily merge up as a commander if the current commander agree. So that's a hardship to the population in Gumuruk that have been imposed on them and the displaced one. So it means forceful displacement also have been imposed on the civilians in Gumuruk, and likely if the government failed to respond timely, Pibor may experience the same situation. Now, at Juba level, what is going on, per your question? Today, I ran from one office to another to assess. First, there's a silence. The only message you hear from Juba is that SSPDF is in direct confrontation with the White Army. But instruction of security, instruction of political leadership to subside what is going on is completely zero at Juba level. The only person who have made an appeal for assistance is the government of Jongole through the statement made by the official spokesperson of Jongole State. He have made a clear message that he don't want the national government to come. So now the government didn't. So today I wake up and I move to quite a number of offices asking them, we are losing lives of our own citizens. And if we say we really want to stand up as a government and want to see citizens are protected, you need to show something. So I was able to mobilize some few as an organization. We'll be holding a meeting of political leaders from these particular constituencies that are in crisis. So the Akobo region, the Duk region, the Pibor, and specifically on the side of the Gumuruk and part of the Bor, they are leaders in the government in Juba. It means ministers, deputy ministers, members of parliament, members of council of states were bringing them together to send a signal. At least if God blessed us, we may do that next tomorrow. So they send a signal, but also we've been working. Of course, UNIMIS is now doing a huge patrol on the ground to deter more violence against the civilian population. But remember, UNIMIS is not a confrontational force that they can confront. So the time when the White Army were marching into Gumuruk, UNIMIS capability is not there to protect the White Army from doing that. And they're not ready to confront them. Besides, the concept of protection of civilians is within the mandate of UNIMIS. And that also raised the question that the early warning was raised long time ago for deterrence of this violence. And I was part of the early warning. We raised the first early warning on the 15th of December. UNIMIS consistently from 15 December until 20th keep on saying there's a possibility of imminent violence that are waged by the White Army against the Greater Pibor villages, and Gumuruk is a target. But we didn't get any quick or what we call early response from the government because the government just was watching. Now it's a fire. The government is speaking at the level of the state level, at the level of the Greater Pibor Administrative Area, but not at the level of Juba, people are silent. Political elites were silent. So in terms of modality, per now, I've never seen any modality that the national government is developing or deploying to subside the crisis there. And of course, the only thing that I've seen is that the army are preparing themselves to go and overrun the control of Gumuruk. But from our side as a SEPO, next tomorrow are holding a meeting in Juba for all the political leaders from so they can make a statement and make an appeal for calm down to the situation. But Juba is quiet, no official statement. And this, today when I was moving around the offices, many people are telling me that, don't you remember one time, one day in J1, President have said that he's tired of this communal violence. Let people fight. Those who are defeated will come to him for protection. So what they expect. And some people were aiding to me that with the recent statement he made about the crisis in Upper Nile, which of course that on the office of the president have said all both, whether the previous one and the recent one statement that the president was sort of like lifting his constitutional responsibility for protecting civilians. The office of the president have denied that that is out of context. That president is taken out of context. It's not real. That's what president meant. But clearly is that the strength of Juba to deploy a system to deter the white army from marching is limited. Let me be honest with you. There's no energy. The only energy is to move a force that they are going to confrontation of people who want to take over power. Then there you can have a response. And that's why you can see, I don't know if you come across, there's a statement which is going on social media from the Central White Army headquarters. I don't know whether they're now having a complete government, because I've seen a statement with the heading of what we call the headquarters, the central headquarters of the White Army, challenging those who condemn the White Army for going to Gumuruk, for committing atrocities. So you can see when an entity like White Army is now having a central command and central headquarters to communicate, I think the government is no longer in charge of the affairs of the public in the sub-national level. So government energy to go to sub-national level respond is a bit challenging. So that is a situation that is there. And the implication of this on the peace agreement, the implication is that where this active communal violence is taking place, the security arrangements is totally undermined. Because some of those forces that are trained and graduated, they have turned back and they have joined these particular militia groups. And I'm actually worried that some of the guns that are supposed to be used for unifying the forces are now used for communal violence. Because RPG-7, RPG-11, PKMs, guns that are people are using during the day of the confrontation are in the hands of the youth for killing themselves without any conventional command structure. So actually, sometimes I start asking, why do you graduate our soldiers with the sticks while civilians have too many guns that if you ask them, can you give it to the soldiers who can have? So it means we are not honest to ourselves. We are not sincere. What we say is not what is reflecting what is in our heart and our mind. What is in our heart and our mind is totally different from what we say. And I think clearly indicators are coming out that our political elites in the current formation of the government are really, really people of high level of political indiscipline. They have high attitudes of political indiscipline, and they are not matured in politics. They are completely 80% ethnic-centered individuals. So the government for them is a combination of ethnic control of the affairs of the public. They don't rule the government because there's a constitution, because there's a law, there's a policy. They don't think about that. Me, with my ethnic group, as I benefit, my ethnic group benefit, we go. Because, honestly, what do you call the High Command Council Conference, the 8th one, ended less than 2 weeks. This incident in Upper Nile is going on as if those commanders who are fighting in Upper Nile, these guns and the bullets used in Jongole Pibor crisis, as if they're not getting out of the barracks of the government. They are purchased by national money, national wealth, but they're used for championing ethnic cleansing, extremism. They've been used for that. So now the question comes, are we buying the weapons to protect the nation, or are we buying the weapons to fuel communities to kill themselves? Those become a big, big, big questions. And for me, this tells you the political indiscipline that our leaders have. And I will tell you, some of these prophets, some of the prophets, and some of the traditional leaders, being red chiefs or being the prophets like Dakwech, they're aided by renowned military commanders and political elites that are based in Juba. Imagine you have over 200 to 300 youth with guns, and if each of them have guns that can sustain 72 hours military confrontation, where are the stores of the bullets? Where do they buy those bullets? Who supplied them? They've been supplied for how long? And how confident them that if they go and they confront SPDF, their bullets will not get finished? That means they have a consistent supply source. And that supply source might have been taken from the store of the government. So that's why, in my conclusion with regard to this particular issue of what's going on between Jongole and Pibor, and what's going on in Mangala and what's going on in Upper Nile, is that if we want to find a solution, number one, rule of law need to be imposed. Number two, some of these traditional and spiritual leaders need to be held accountable because they're enjoying too much culture of impunity. Number three, the president need to be careful. He's working with teams that are digging for him a hole. Now, if you start saying NAS is in Mangala, what's the guarantee there's no NAS in Juba town? If you start saying NAS is in Mangala, even real, honestly, that you're confronting NAS in Mangala. With the tarmac road from Mangala to Juba, sincerely, there's no political logic here. It's a clear sense of sending to the signal your life is under risk because we're able to allow armed rebels up to fight us in Mangala to confront them. And even they made a proud statement. We have 5 live arrested. This number was killed. These numbers are going treatment. My friend, at the Mangala, with all military intelligence, security, with all these things, they reach up to there. So the sincerity of these facts is questionable. Whether it's not been used as a strategy of escaping responsibility of atrocity committed, because I know that there's a confrontation between cattle herders and members of national security when they are coming on their way to Juba in Mangala. They find cattle, as they're asking the cattle, they exchange fire with the cattle herders, and it ends up as a confrontation. So for me, it's a question of really president need to review the team around him. If it's to be honest, that is working with a good team. If there's no team who are digging a hole for him, actually. This one. Two, the leadership of the president need to build a culture that rule of law cannot be compromised with. Jongole is suffering from absence of rule of law. What is going on between the Pibor and the Murle, which has happened in Nimule, in Mogale, between the pastoralists, is absence of rule of law. Upper Nile is suffering from a sponsored defection that end up manufacturing proxy wars. All these are characteristics of political indiscipline when you have political leaders who use political indiscipline as a rationale of arguing for control of a power and resource in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Edmond Yakani, for updating the public in regard to the ongoing conflict in Pibor Administrative Area. It's very unfortunate indeed if I try to imagine how an enemy overran the whole county. And the county is constituted of children, elderly people, women, and vulnerable groups. Where do you think these people are now? It's something so sad indeed. But the questions, Mr. Edmond, there are two group of army which were invented in 2013 crisis. One was called Matiang Anyor, another one is called White Army. And lately, Matiang Anyor seemed to be absorbed into National Army. What happened to the White Army? Or the White Army is of two faces. There is White Army 1 and White Army 2. And if that is the case, who is the leader of White Army now? Because the White Army of 2013 was under Dr. Riek Machar, the first vice president. And who is in control of this white army of 2022 that is waging war against civilians and community of Murle? Is it Simon Gadwich? And if it is Simon Gadwich, then what happened between Gatwich and Johnson Oloin? We really need your wisdom on that. And on the same note, you will also tell us what triggered that fight. Is it cattle raiding? Is it children abductions? Or what exactly that prompted them to wage war against their brothers in Pibor Administrative Area, and especially in Gumuruk? Thank you, Edmund.
Thank you very much. First, if you talk about I don't know, how can I call them? Community Defense Force, militias, army of an ethnic setups. Anyway, in general, these are militias. As long as they're not formal state army, they're militias. You know, because absence of rule of law that is imposed by the state has created a new culture where people start building what we call self-defense team, self-defense group. And this self-defense group is becoming a new culture that is undermining the constitutional obligation of the state and the government in running public affairs. When the Matianganyor came, was to protect the state from an ethnic identity. As you said, they have been observed, they have been dismantled, because most of them are not having a structure that is consistent, rooted into the ethnic setups. So they've been used as a political mobilization of a force. So because they don't have ethnic, traditional rooted instrument that will bring them to surface, it has gone. And easily observed, and some of them disappear in their streets. But the White Army is a community well-structured force. It's the same like the Red Chiefs in Greater Pibor, and specifically the area of Gumuruk and Namnam. They have a structure that is traditional, or like the Monyamiti in Eastern Equatoria. They are well-structured. Or you may go to the Budwe Kingdom, you know, the Zande, but then when you have the Arrow Boys, they have a well-structured community entity. So there's a pocket of these groups that are across the country simply because absence of rule of law that is driven by the state and the government. So they come alternatively to protect themselves. But these particular structures are aided by people in the government. So when we say there's an absence of rule of law imposed by the state or by the government on the communities, is actually the spoilers of the rule of law are part of those individuals whom we call them government officials. And that's why it becomes a very hard for you to build culture of rule of law, because the spoilers of rule of law are the one running the machinery of the government. And the indicator is the supply of the ammunition and the rifles, the guns, to the hands of civilians. Who are supplying them? It's the same generals that we call them. These generals that we have them throughout in the government are the ones supplying these ammunitions, are the ones supplying these bullets. So the capability of the state to control the build-up of a non-state actors, it is becoming higher. So it's neither really the problem
just
that of this
1 minute. 1 minute,
yes.
Mr. Edmund. Let me welcome our new guest also who want to weigh in and also give us his opinions in regard to the ongoing conflict. Mr. Kwalgarang, you are highly welcome, my brother. Feel at home, and then you will come in after our guest Edmund Yakani. Thank you for joining us. Go on, Edmund.
Kwal, you're welcome. I can see you consistently concentrating, listening. So the absence of rule of law has built up those groups. So those groups, when they have conventional war, they can join the conventional war. As the conventional war disappears, they melt back to the communities. So the White Army that was then used in the front of the IO were not the forces which are integrated into the unified forces. They melted back to the community. They are more or less like the Agwelek. They followed along. When come unification, they go back to protect the community. They melt back. So it became a new culture in South Sudan that the spoilers of the rule of law are part and parcel of the government officials who are supposed to impose. So the spoilers of rule of law, it is actually part of them are politicians, part of them are the military generals in different security sector. And because they're the spoilers, the only way they have to do is that for them to have credibility, to remain as a political elite of those sections, is to aid those particular groups. That is a problem of the White Army. That's a problem of the Aguelec, and maybe problem of other groups. Maybe what a problem of the Arrow boys in Western Equatoria, may be a problem of the Monyemiji, because absence of the states, people have to look for alternatives, and the White Army become an alternative that they're commanding. Now, who's commanding them? This become the traditional governance system of those communities. Right now, the White Army are under the prophet Dakwech. You like it, you don't like it, it's Dakwech. When you come to this consistent Murle who came to raid well-organized or adapt children and women in well-organized manner, they're under the Red Chiefs, and the Red Chiefs have a structure, and mainly they're based in Anam. And that's why I don't level all Murle that they're all criminals. Simply because the most stubborn and notorious Murles are these guys who are staying in Anam village and part of Gumuruk, whom there's no complete government there, there's absence of government there. If you go as a police, they'll chase you. Who are you? The area is not accessible. These are people who work for 1 month footing, and they're used to, because since childhood they're used to. But for those of us who drive and they are asked to work for 3 days in that area to chase them, you get tired. You can't, because that's the structure they built. Absence of state infrastructure for you to impose rule of law in some parts of Pibor is a problem. So that is the way how the group of the White Army live. And I remember I was in that triangle. I've been in the triangle of the White Army in 2009 and 2010. I used to move those areas, Likwangule, Akobo, Denjok, Nyandit, Wanding. I used to move those areas up to Pibor in. I was doing a lot of peace building in that area, because I was, and you can see if the White Army decide, if the youth decide they don't control the army, they can control them, because their mobilization, their numbers counts. And these are traditional fighters who does not use this model science of military. There's numbers matters. You kill 10, the next 12 or the next 2 ones are in the face of the gun. And you can see the history of the UPDF when they confront themselves in Mangala, when they're coming from Bor marching to Juba. How the UPDF use what sort of, still they can overrun. Yes, you can shoot down 5, but the next 7th one is at you, because they're coming and running. So for me, that is the biggest. And this is the same scenario in Mangala, between when the pastoralist youth from Bor were fighting with the group of the Bari and then the Mundari. You can see numbers matters, but the death, they don't care about the numbers of death. So for me, it's the absence of rule of law that has made these groups to merge as a community protection or defense force. And they become more powerful. Why? Because they are supplied by the people whom we call them as our generals or our national security or police officers or our politicians. Because honestly, brothers, I was closely watching the magnitude of the military confrontation, because I have team on the ground. If you see the confrontation is a conventional war, the White Army have access to rifles, bullets. Imagine they run the National Defense Force headquarters, where there's a choppers, there's a MIC, there's a quick reinforcement, but they were able to kick them out. What does that mean? Who supplied them? Who aid them? Obviously, they're receiving supply from several sources. And that's why the other group, like the Simon Gatwich, you cannot undermine them in not aiding such group, because they need a force, or the Aguelec, or the So now, what happened between the Aguelec and then the other question you have raised, so that I can give my brother a chance?
Yeah, before that, Mr. Edmond, are there chances of this spiritual leader becoming another emerging rebel leader in Upper Nile region?
It's not only in Upper Nile region, it may migrate to other regions, by the way. With the absence of rule of law, there's a committee that's coming up. There's a high chances that you may not level them as rebel leaders, but you may merge them as a force against the state. They become non-state actors that even subject the state to listen to them. There's that tendency. That tendency is very high. Actually, if we speak right now, you go to the triangle of the Sholok and the Nuer, where Gatwich and Olonya are operating. There's no government there. They are in charge.
It's very unfortunate.
Yeah,
very
they're in charge.
unfortunate indeed.
Commissioners have to listen to them. Look at our brother, Biel Butrus, who was an activist by then with us, and he joined the IO. He went as a commissioner to Fangak. I was communicating to him. Look at the way how he is demanding support. That the Agwelek are coming. So as a commissioner, who is commander-in-chief of the county, the chairperson of the security of the county, you start calling. You feel that the force around you cannot confront a non-state actors. Simply because they're aided from the headquarters. They're not aided from where? The headquarters can be the barracks of the bullets and the guns. The headquarters can be the center of the political decisions. They're aided from there. The headquarters can be the judiciary. That's supposed to impose rule of law, but rule of law has been undermined. That's the unfortunate situation. And they become a determining force that if you want to listen to them, you have to appoint who they think is a person. I'll give a case study.
Love one.
Yes, we have ministers under this government that sometimes does not listen to the governor. Why? Because these ministers are the agents of the commanders on the ground of the forces. Yeah. So the commanders of the ground communicate to minister than to the governor because that minister represents the commanders. And you can't talk about these ministers. There are case studies across the country in the 10 states that are like that. So for me, that is the absence of ethics of what we call public governance. We are ruling ourselves in traditional way, in a way of cliques, groups, friends, loyalists. But ruling ourselves with constitution, with the policy, with the rule of law is not there. And that's why for me, it's a high responsibility of the president to check the team he's working with, whether around him or at sub-national level. Some of them are not really taking the responsibility that we have constitution, we have laws to impose them. Regardless of where you're coming from, regardless of what political color you belong to, the state is the best interest of everybody. Our common interest South Sudanese is the function of the state, is the function of the government. But now when you're in the government and you undermine the function of the state, you start supporting a function of non-state structures, then you don't need to be in the government. You don't need to be in the state. So those individuals, if they're not rooted out of the government, we cannot have that. So that's what I like to draw. Olony and Gatwich, what is happening? Olony and Gatwich, these are victims of a sponsored defection, turned to become agencies of proxy war. Where will they go? There's a rumors that these guys want to come to Atar. They are Gwelek, but they are not in consensus with SSPDF. They dislodge SSPDF where they are Gwelek. So, and those are what happening in Upper Nile. So Upper Nile is not going to be stable. And one reason that I'm a bit keen about our region of Upper Nile, which really I want to appeal to our diaspora. We must be careful that when we have been fighting Khartoum, and specifically late 90s, toward 2000, Khartoum have manufactured quite a number of warlords. The Tanginyang, the Peter Gadets. Now they have their followers who are by then young, and then now they're believing on those footmarks. And some of them come from that level to a central level of decision-making in Juba. You know? So for me, we need to remember that particular trend. We should not undermine it. That's not a trend that undermines public governance. So for me, that's why I would like to say that Upper Nile will continue suffering from sponsored defections that end up as a proxy war. That's one of the things that we need to make it very clear here in this particular discussion. What triggered this particular violence? So that I can give chance to my brother, because I saw him really keenly following. Maybe also can get from an input that I've never stressed enough. He may stress or he may clarify some of the clarity. This particular situation was not new. Last year, by the end of last year, there was mobilization. The mobilization was subsided because of the response to that mobilization. Remember, even that mobilization of last year is including Anyuak from Ethiopia. They're coordinating between the Denkabor, the Murle, the Anyuak, and then Anyuak from Ethiopia. They want to march to Pibor. That was subsided. Why? Because it grew a lot of early warning system responses. So recently, what happened is that when the situation in Upper Nile became tense, some bit of Nuer White Army migrated to join the crisis in Upper Nile side of there. So when they moved there, their force below here left behind is a bit small. So these Red Chiefs from Nanam of Greater Pibor Administrative Area came in. They adapted, they raided, they looted, and consistently, I think 3 times. And that annoyed the White Army. They said, look here, Upper Nile subsided, we're going to Pibor. And we need to target Gumuruk. That's the trigger. And what the mobilizers, Dakwech is mobilizing from his side. Red chiefs were mobilizing in response of Dakwech force coming. But unfortunately, that Dakwech was more, his mobilization was more powerful if they can defeat SSPDF. And likely you may have transfer of guns from the crisis of Upper Nile, the remnants, the supply that went there. And that's what I'm saying, sometimes you are supplying ammunitions to support defections to overcome your opponent. Unfortunately, the people who subsidize them turn those weapons for killing themselves. So being whatever party among the parties signed agreement who are sponsoring proxy war in Upper Nile, they have seen now what they have created. That has happened in Gumuruk. And if you go and do proper tracing of rivals and the bullets used and the guns used in that war, you will not miss 100% to identify that these guns were purchased by national money, supplied through a national fund, but end up in the hands of the youth. Because there's a system you can trace. You can go and collect the leftover of the guns, and then you can analyze them. And you can see where they supplied, when were they supplied, from which supply source. You can trace their system, you can trace it. You come to realize it's actual official ammunitions or rifles or bullets purchased by the government of South Sudan that were put in the stores, but in the stores they find themselves in the hands of what? Of these groups. And that's why I'm saying the spoilers of rule of law are within the system of the government. And that's why it gave advantage for a community protection team merge up and undermine the function of the states. And I think that's really big political responsibility that I'd like to end up that our country will never move smoothly. This pocket of violence will continue. There's a merging case coming from Tonch East. Still, Tonch is not yet sorted out. We have seen clashes there, and we have seen already 17 registered deaths. Revenge attack is going to come. So what I've been in Tonch is, I would like to tell you, honestly, Tombra is not yet sorted out. There's early warning telling other people are preparing for Tombra. Nimule is not sorted out. Apan is not sorted out. Borneo is breaking, we have seen. Mangala is not breaking it, as we have seen. We've seen there. These are all clear indicators that when you lack political discipline among the political leaders who run the machinery of the government, that's the consequences. And that's why I think there's a need for even if you bring a heavenly agreement and you give before these politicians who lack political indiscipline, honestly, Jesus Christ will run away to be a monitor of a heavenly agreement to be implemented in South Sudan. Jesus will never be an overall supervisor of a spiritual agreement that God directed him that we go and supervise South Sudan to implement our biblical agreement. Because we are political indisciplined. We're political immature. We believe on tribe more than the state. The common good for the citizens is not in us. We don't have it. Because if you have common good, we could have used dialogue on what is going on in between the Lone Nuer and then the Murle. We could have used dialogue what's going on between the Aguelec and the Nuer in Upper Nile. We could have used dialogue what's going on in Mangala. But now we've reached to the level that we don't see dialogue as an option. The option is show your strength. So the language of the gun class is taking dominance in setting up a social and cultural classes in South Sudan. So we're setting too many gun class that undermine social fabric that was supposed to coexist regardless of our ethnic background. So thank you over there. Let me give chance to my brother, maybe have input of something that I've left out and maybe also add more clarity. So thank you over there.
Thank you so much, Brother Edmond Yakani, for your inputs and for your thoughts and your suggestions and what possibly could be the solutions to the crisis in our country. You always said the political class need to review the activities. They need to review themselves. Until we have disciplined political class, that's where we will have disciplined citizen. And if political class are indisciplined, they will feed people with their indiscipline. And remember, starvation, as you put it earlier, is another weapon. The government is using it. Other people are using it. For you to be vulnerable, you will have no options than to follow somebody who always give you food. Whatever ideas that the person will tell you, that's what you will act upon. And I think that's what is happening. It's very unfortunate indeed. Before we go to the issue of Mangala, I will first welcome my brother Akwal to give us his opinions in regard to the ongoing conflict in Pibor Administrative Area. Thereafter, we will wrap it up with the incidents of Mangala. It was very unfortunate because we saw a video clip on Facebook circulating, and it was so sad to see our army killing civilian, according to that clip. We don't know what triggered them. We don't know what provoked them. And they were deployed purposely to protect those civilians in Mangala Road. And unfortunately, something happened. Brother Kwal, welcome to Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries, and give us your opening remark. Tell us where you are and your full details. Then you will let us know. We are here to discuss the genesis of this conflict. What triggered this conflict now? Is it cattle raiding? Is White Army going there to raid cattle of Murle? Or is it because Murle notorious group came to them and abduct their children? And why is it that rumors saying there are some Boer youth also who join hand together with White Army to attack Gumuruk? And who is the leader of White Army? That is one thing people need to know, and the citizen too need to know who is the leader of White Army. And our good guest here, Edmund, put it clearly that there is a spiritual leader who is taking lead when it comes to the White Army decision making, where to attack, at what time, and on what reason. Thank you, brother. Call. The chance is yours. Activate your mic.
Okay. Is my voice clear?
Yes, you are crystal clear.
How do you say your name again?
My name is Majok.
Okay, Majuk. And
yes.
The brother
And
who
Edmund.
just finished talking is Edmund Yakini.
Edmund Yakani, yeah.
Yakani.
Yeah.
All right. I wrote my Facebook name there, Kwal, but I would say I would introduce myself. My full name is Kwal Garam. I usually go by Nuri on Facebook. I used to be a guest on Lagos State Media. So this is a familiar territory. But the reason I want to have my insight of this issue is because is experience. I been exposed to human rights studies, and I also been exposed to countries that have been involved in violence and how they have had dealt with post-violence. One country would be Rwanda, if you recall, in 1994. So whenever there is an issue or an issue regarding human rights violation, it touched my heart and touched my interest. So this is the reason I put up an request to have a comment about this situation. I'm a historical. I grew up during the SPLA war. One of you also did. So we know how these issues usually emerge and continue to exist. Now, if you would pose a question, then I can answer the question. But if you want me to comment, then I can comment on it. Do you want me to pose a question regarding this issue, or do you want me to just comment historically what has been happening with regard to people who have taken arm against their state and against communities and against citizens, and why it has been happening so many times within the country, when in fact many people would be saying the country has been liberated, there's no second liberation. The second liberation should be focusing on development and opening schools, building health centers, and invest in agriculture. But that has not been the case. We have had people who have taken or continue to take arm against communities and against citizens and against the state in a large scale, you can imagine. Do you want to impose a question, Majuk, or do you want me to comment generally as to
Thank
what has
you.
been
Thank
happening
you.
historically?
Thank you so much, Nuri, for your introduction. Exactly, your introduction has opened a way for me to pose a question. It seems, according to your knowledge and your research and your exposure, you might be having solutions that can be adopted by the government of South Sudan in order to address such human right violation and to address such conflicts that have been inflicted upon their fellow citizen. On that note, I would ask you to give us your experience. You gave us good example of Rwanda genocide in 1994. And not only in Rwanda, there are numerous countries that went through such challenges, especially at the earlier stage of the independence that we are in now as the country. But what were the modalities used by those countries or the leadership of those countries? Uganda is not exceptional. Can you tell us exactly, and the first thing that you will do is to give us comments in regard to the historical backgrounds of this genesis or of this crisis in Upper Nile region or in Barkazar region or in Equatorial region. After you give us historical context, that is where you will give us your opinions to suit with the current affairs of the world and especially the current affairs of our nation. Thank you so much, Brother Nuri.
Yeah. So thank you, Brother Majuk. These are comments, and they would be watched by many people, and they would be listened to by many people. So the debate and the discourse will continue. We'll continue to talk about this until one day we'll be able to find a solution. There will be more people who will be coming forward because this issue will continue to agitate and make people much more restless to even get up and speak on this. I think Brother Majuk is the issue has been historical grievances, people who have raised grievances, and if those grievances have not been addressed, if you go back in 1990s when the SPLA split, there were people who called for democratization within the movement. And those people, they are big, high profile individuals today in the government of South Sudan. There was a resistance, or there was a legitimate question whether or not democratization of the movement or a guerrilla would be a priority at that particular point. You recall two famous doctors, they fought very seriously on the issue whether or not the SPLA should be a democratic movement or it be a revolutionary movement. For Dr. Grant, who passed away in 2005, was saying, look, we're here fighting. We don't have government to democratize here. We don't have a state to democratize here. We don't have society to democratize here. We are here to fight and to win the fight and to change the system which has been imposing injustices on the people of Sudan or the people of the Sudan. And as you know, he was fighting for Sudanism and fighting against marginalization and so many injustices that were imposed by people who designed the country in Islamic image and Arabization or Arabizing image. And then for the current doctor, who is now the first vice president, was calling for democratization of the revolution. So they never agreed. You recall he went back to Khartoum and signed Khartoum agreement. That never really gave him the idea to rule the southern Sudan by that time as an autonomous region. In the end, he came back. To make it short, he came back, and they were put together to make sure there was a comprehensive peace agreement. Otherwise, if they never had reconciled or came together, we would have never had any idea of the comprehensive peace agreement. So the international community really put them, the IGAD, the AU put them to make sure they come together and save the humanity in that manner. All right. But the grievances were never addressed. You remember in the 90s, so many people were killed, civilians were killed, and never really asked the question of justice in a more personal way, individual way. So many people were destroyed, livelihood of many people were destroyed, and never really raised a question when the country became independent. There was no reconciliation, there was no healing. And then people took advantage of the state that if they took arm against the government, then that became the easy way for anybody to get back into the government and achieve power. My brother will recall so many people, high-profile individuals today, who took arm against the government, and they became very important politicians today. Nobody is asking whether they should be running a state because they use violence, or whether they should be asked in a court of law, because my brother talked about the rule of law. Rule of law starts with those people who took arm against the government to redress the justice of the people. Rule of law starts with self-reflection. When people do self-reflection to look into themselves and take a courage to apologize to people that they have caused harm in the most severest way. It has not been happening. In the state, the opposite is true. People have been taking arm, and many agreements have been signed, and those agreements have brought people back into power. People who would have been maybe 20 years away from the most high-profile position in the government are now in the most high-profile position because they have used arms. So, in the case of Rwanda, to put your mind into it, there was so much violence. About 1 million or 800,000 people were killed. But what they did, leaning forward and moving forward, is that yes, they form a power-sharing government, but they didn't stop there, because a power-sharing government would mean you bring everybody in. They did it in South Sudan. That's why we have 5 vice presidents. That's power-sharing government to make sure you quell down the desire to continue with the arm against the state. They did that in Rwanda, but they didn't stop there. They also went to community and established what they call traditional court, where people would be traveling across the country. And of course, people were trained to talk to people who were harmed, and people from various communities came up to have their inputs as to what future would look like, what reconciliation would look like. So people testify, there were testimonies, they used qualitative research to ask people and point it at people that Mr. So-and-so involved in destroying my family, but I'm here to forgive so that we can move forward. So there was a series of confession and series of testimonies. So politicians who involved in that also involved in forging and supporting reconciliation. People who did large-scale killing, they were given retribution. They were given severe punishment. But of course, the government of Rwanda did not do it by itself. The government of Rwanda seek help from the International Criminal Court to make sure people who committed large-scale atrocities were taken to Arusha to be put on trial there, so that resources were put in, legal expertise they were brought to put those people on trial. People who committed minor crimes, the government of Rwanda used a traditional court system where people would be testifying and then also be familiar with each other and offer to forgive to each other. So those minor crime, they were dealt by government of Rwanda through a traditional court system. So traditional leaders, traditional chiefs, they were brought in, community leaders were brought in, people from a diaspora came in to help in supporting this traditional court at various community levels. So people were ready to forgive, and that's why, in a unique way, they call it culture, that became a model, a traditional court model that Rwanda supported, government of Rwanda supported to bring people together. So in South Sudan, you recall, and even now, there's never been even an example of justice that has been set. Never. Whether on a high-profile individual, whether on somebody who murdered people, whether during 1990s, whether during 80s, or whether in 2000, in the case of 2013, no a single politician or a single general who has been brought to the court of law or questioned. No a single politician who has hurt or who has South Sudan at heart, or citizen of South Sudan at heart, who went out from community to community, state to state, to really pressure the Republic of South Sudan or the government of South Sudan to put the idea of national reconciliation and healing and coming together. There's no, in state, people have been using military might and various warlords and people who supported them at the community level to actually intimidate the state, to pressure the state to be submissive and get back into this signing this agreement so that they can get into power. So historical grievances that emerged during the war, because they have not been addressed, it has really undermined the rule of law, because nobody is afraid anymore. Because if you have your community behind you, then you can easily intimidate the state. People in various communities, they raise arms against the state, and they have been quite successful at it, and they have been getting away because nobody or state, no state has been able to punish them. So it has become a behavior, a normal behavior. It has been normalized, and there's no accountability. Nobody is taking responsibility. So my brother Edmund Yakani is very knowledgeable about which group is fighting which group, and which area is fighting which area. and which politician is fighting which politician, and which general is fighting which general. But the issue has been that people who are taking arm or who have taken arm before, because they have not been called on the accountability, they have gotten used to that, to intimidate the state and to kill people very easily, because they know no state is going to come after them, or no legal system is going to come after them. The current hybrid court, I was hoping the hybrid court that was also enshrined into the agreement of 2015 would have been made much more stronger. I was hoping that one politician or one group or civil society or institution such as government of South Sudan, especially in the Department of Justice, would be able to call for hybrid court to be established so that people can be put on trial, and would be able to really pressure the African Union and the IGAD. If they're not able to do it, then they should also reach out to the International Criminal Court, Tribunal Court, so that these people would be held accountable. That's how you can be able to stop anybody who will be taking out, because they know they would be punished like generals who were punished from Congo violence. There were generals who were punished, involved in violence. They were punished, they were caught, and they were put on trial. And the same thing in the case of Rwanda. There were people involved in killing people. They were put on trial in Arusha. So I was hoping that civil society of South Sudan, civil society group, or whoever is really taking the issue of justice very seriously and crime against humanity very seriously, would be coming out and really call for addressing of grievances in two ways. One would be retributive, and one would be restorative. Restorative, that would be done at community level. So bringing communities together, that would be restorative. Bring people together, let them testify, let them be ready to forgive, and then have the government moving in to help people with some remedies, people in which their livelihood have been destroyed. And then really put retribution on people who committed crime against humanity, because you can't turn a blind eye to people who have launched a massive scale in terms of destroying humanity in South Sudan. So there are options, but who is going to do it? How do you do it? How do you make this hybrid court, which is in the agreement, which brought them into power? How do you make it stronger? How do you call for it now? How do you put them on trial when nobody is ready to do it? You will need a state, a government, to be leading the way to do that.
Thank you, Brother Nuri, aka Kwalgarang, for your historical remark and for also reminding us about the accountability. It's a very good aspect that you have drive your point home, and the accountability questions seem to be the one behind all these atrocities being committed in the country. Because if there is no accountability, even animals themselves, like domestic animal one, if you don't put them in order, like goats, hens, and even cow, they cannot obey you, despite you are taking control of them. And they are animals, they cannot obey you. But if you put them in order, they will always follow your order and what you wish them to do. Mr. Edmond Yakani, how I wish Brother Kwal joined us earlier so that we have enough time for you to talk at the lengthy hours, because you seem to be knowledgeable, two of you, and you seem to be gentlemen who are advocating for human rights. either in South Sudan or in East Africa, and in totality, the continent of Africa. And I like that. But time is not on our side. We will still try to give some thoughts on that note. Mr. Edmund Yakani, kindly, can you give us your comments, because you are one of the activists, the prominent activists in that country, who is always at the front line when it comes to the issues of human rights violation in the country, when it comes to the issues of communal violence in that country, when it comes to the political crisis in our country, you are always there. And Brother Nuri brought a very nice point of accountability, hybrid court, and that is well stipulated in chapter 5 of our revitalized peace agreement. But can you let us know what happened? It seemed like we are gambling with agreement, trying to implement what impress us and neglect what implicates us. Kindly, can you give us your thoughts? And then we'll go back to my brother, Nura.
Yeah, I do agree with Nur on that ideal thinking, ideal rationale. In the case of Rwanda, I'm somebody who really put a lot of energy on Rwanda. And later on, I come and just in my conclusion, put something that my opinion also about the Rwandan style and South Sudan style. First, remember, I was been insisting. I say that the spoilers, get this statement well, the spoilers of rule of law, or the spoilers of access to justice, the spoilers for accountability are the same people in the government. Get that statement clear. Where have you seen a criminal going to court to report himself to a judge that here I am, and that the same criminal, you're asking that, please put the judges to be independent, and the power of making the judges to be independent is under that? Honestly, will that work? Have you ever seen in Arabic that the person who holds the pen will never make any mistake to write anything shit about himself? That's an Arabic praise. Which in our African common, that when you sit in a power, you cannot bring a rope to hang yourself and leave the chair. You know, when you sit in the chair like this, and you're told that you bring a rope to hang yourself so that you leave this chair, it will never happen. So where is the dilemma? The dilemma is what Anur have made. Is that actually after 2005, after 2011, when we got our independence, we are building on the notion that we are reconstructing the state of South Sudan. And I'll tell you, by the way, that time I was very active activist. I used to deal with donor group called Joint Donors Team, which support the GPAA. By the way, the GPAA have something called Joint Donor Team. And I was head of the Joint Donors Team because the Joint Donors Team believes that the state of South Sudan exists. And I'm somebody who comes from a background, the state of South Sudan does not exist. What we are doing is that we are building on a fake state established by Khartoum. Yes, we have few South Sudanese in the police sector, we have few South Sudanese in the judiciary, we have few South Sudanese in the army, but they don't constitute the state. That's not the state. The state is political leadership, technocrats, and then you have specific scales in specific institutions. Because like the case of Rwanda, the case of Rwanda is that one person have to impose a system. It was Kagame. It was Kagame who imposed. There's no way. Kagame have to impose the gachacha. The gachacha is what we call justice from the grassroots. That's the interpretation. Why? Because he fear if he comes for the conventional way of justice, he may be also under question. That what do you know about the factors that trigger the genocide since you lead a movement? And remember, there's a lot of questions around that. And that's why sometimes when you go to Rwandan Memorial, Normal, there's a very hard question there. If you ask, you'll be deported, my brother. If you go to Rwanda Memorial, there's a one question, try to ask. Try to ask, where is the site of the minority history of the Hutus who might have suffered injustice? Though the Tutsi have the huge injustice, but there will be a minority Hutus. And why always the interpretators? There's absence of Hutu narrative. It's only Tutsi narrative. What happened? When you ask that question, you'll be deported. So it's a smart strategic design stage. And that's why I do agree with my brother. Sometimes justice is not completely 100% clean, but somebody have to build something that nurture the culture of justice to prevail, which Rwanda have done, which Congo have done. Somehow in Darfur, the people went to Hague and Darfur. It's a gesture that let us start laying down the foundation of justice, which in South Sudan we don't have. We could have done even in our own courts. We could have established our own courts. This Juba conference, if you remember, when we were going prior to independence in towards the end of 2010, that's what we call Juba conference, where I brought all the militia groups. And the militia groups reached consensus that, okay, we're not going to support the referendum. We're all going to vote for unity. Because by then there's a fear that these militia groups may spoil the referendum. They may be used by Khartoum to spoil the referendum. So then President Salva observed them. But their observation was on compromise. What was the compromise? The compromise, what my brother Nur have said. They have been lifted. I remember, I was an activist. I remember I used to be in the airport, Juba International Airport, to observe, because I used to do an observation of the militia's arrival for Juba conference. Do you know, my brother, some of the militia commanders come with ranks in their pockets. There are various ranks in their pockets. So when they see the person receiving them is having 2 stars, they'll put 3 stars so that they look boss, so that they're saluted for. When they see that, no, you imagine a mere soldier who was not professional trained come with ranks in his pocket. He just want to see who is receiving him. The rank receiving him, he put a higher rank than that so that he checks the protocol. And that's how they observe. So it is an informal setup of a state institution in traditional way that undermine the notion of what the function of the government and the state is in relation to responsibility to protect. To protect what? To protect constitutional governance, to protect the existence of the state, to protect the existence of the government. We lost that particular narrative. Why we lost it? Because we have taken too much compromises to the level that even compromises become a notion of buying power. And that trend continue, my brother Nur, it continued to the level that even 2013, people who have 3 sort of like Talata Shirid or maybe 1 star, you defect and you come back as a brigadier. Some of them are having self-promotion. And I'm going to quote one person.
Even those who defected without none.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Came back,
musicians
back at General.
from plucking the guitar, 6 months the bush, you're brigadier general, and you want to go to Bilfam. And now here you want to take a responsibility to make a defense decision that require a 6 years class of study to inform your mindset on how to make the decision. Just from singing a song. From singing a song to the bush, you come brigadier, you're in Bilfam, and you're put in research to decide a defense decision that protect the whole nation. So imagine, and you have never gone to a class where to really know scientifically such decisions, what type of factors won't take into account. You don't have that culture. That is a dilemma we have in now. Actually, I'll tell you, we have over 70% of the government is run by militia leaders, not professionals. It's just titles. It's titles. Titles, just you come, like the way how Bashir, actually we build too much on Bashir's strategy, how we undermine the function of South Sudan by then. In Bashir times, if you are somebody who repair watches and you're able to say Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, next tomorrow you're commissioned to your community. That's the theory we use. We build on that theory. And that undermines the actual interpretation of what we call the state instruments for running a government. We undermine them. Because when it comes to justice, in the justice, there's principles. Equality before the law and equal protection by the law. And nobody is above the what? The law. So it means even if you're a big man, you're not above the law. You're supposed to respect the law because you are building a notion that generations who come behind you, they have to follow that notion. So you have to sacrifice for the law to take its course. And that is what we miss in South Sudan. And we undermine that by entertaining political power too much. Look at these 550 MPs. Go and do proper analysis whether they carry the ethics to become an honorable member. A member who is honorable member. This is a lawmaker. Who is a lawmaker must be somebody well-informed. And if he's well-informed, the parliament, he does not function in an open parliament. He must belong to a specific specialized committee. And that specific specialized committee requires specialized a specific academic background. That specific academic background requires commitment that you sit in a room of reading and writing. But my friend, from the farm, loyalists, from being from the farm, loyalist, now you're chairperson of a specialized committees on energy and something like that. My friend, you have never know even what energy is, but you now say I'm honorable chairperson of, my friend, when you ask like, what is it? But what's wrong with you? Why don't you go to the bush and come and ask me this question? Do you know that I will come from the bush? So bush does not qualify to run a state. And that's why there's a notion that people who normally struggle to create an independent state will not be the same people who will build the state. Because that one is cocking and shooting and moral. But now this one, pen, reading, testing, you know, yes, you have done your part by cocking, shooting, and you brought the state. Now it's the time for you to say, thank you guys. I've done my part. Now I'm handing over to you. And that's where the question of the hybrid court, the answer is. The hybrid court require people who understand the importance of justice as an instrument of nurturing a state that belongs to all. But when you start having people who start even fear the concept of nurturing a state that belongs to all, you know, if you're operating with the members of animal farm, and I know you know the theory of animal farm, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than what? Others. When you operate with supporters of animal farm, it's very hard for you to change the equation that there's no some that are more equal than us. They say, no, we are all liberators. That's why if you go to our public offices, normally I used to tell people, if you test animal farm, you go to our public offices, you argue. Go to Minister of Finance, go to Minister of Education, especially like my colleague Anur. That's how our diaspora suffer. Our diaspora who come with an academic knowledge. If they go to the public institution, they also argue like the way how Anur was arguing. They'll ask you, my brother, which battle were you in? Were you in Chukudum, or were you in Bill Farm, or were you in, you know, what's the relations of using those battles to argue process for building a state? Yes, you have fought those battles, we are not there, but we are coming with the mindset that those battles is no longer important. And that is the problem. Where do we need? We need a champion. And I would say up to now, champion of justice not there. Let me give you an example, my brothers, and especially Anur. We try to do a smart way for justice. The smart way is that the hybrid court debate is that AU itself, AU fear to set a precedence of hybrid court in South Sudan. Because the same leaders of AU are so much brutal to their own citizens. So they come to realize if we test the model of hybrid court succeed in South Sudan, will be applied in the rest of the countries. They run away. That's why there's a lack of commitment from AU, because they see that you are setting a precedence in South Sudan, which they want to go to the model of the Rwanda. Now, we start using the Commission for Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation as an entry point, because at the end of the day, if you have the Commission for Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation, you can't undermine justice. There will be cases under the Commission for Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation to be referred to a hybrid court. So that means, technically, by having the Commission for Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation, hybrid court will come to function. Some of them discover, they say, oh, what type of reconciliation? People say, let's go for the Rwandan style of the gachacha. They say, but the gachacha, I'm the community leader. So imagine, even the grassroots-based approach of justice is being spoiled with the fear that if I paraded before my community will all deny me and not get a political seat. And that's why you see the commission have done all the consultations. And by the way, another instrument that can tell you whether there's a political interest for justice or not, look at the outcome of the national dialogue, which was designed for undermining a process, but then they come and support a process that actually the designers does not want. So this tells you very clear that until you have an attitude change, until you have a political shift of thinking, our ideal ideas will find it so hard resisted by those who believe that we're champions, something that undermines their dominance. It's a question of now, do people give in to dominate power? And so the actual state of South Sudan process kicks on. And the next test, my brother Noor, which I feel is going to bring another test, is the constitution-making process, which the law was signed by President. And then the constitution-making process is going to be an instrument for reconciliation, an instrument for testing accountability, an instrument for demanding justice. So constitution-making process is not going to be like a prayer in the church, where the pastor says from the book of Luke, and then to the book of Rome, then he interpreted it, then he said, let's sing the song, Hallelujah, amen, amen. God is every time is good, good. No, constitution is going to be debate. System of governance, independence of judiciary is another tool of reconciliation. If can be allowed to run its traditional pathway, if it was not spoiled in the middle. So for me, we have good ideas, we have good thinking of it, but the question is, we are speaking to ourselves. The people that we need to take the decision of what we are thinking about are the people who rejected the ideas we are sharing among ourselves. And that's why this gives me now the narrative of the, there's this Nigerian scholar who say, Africans, you are saying you want to have a good democratic government. When the good people are abstaining themselves from government, they are running to NGOs, they are running to private sector, and you're allowing the wrong people to go to the government. What type of government are you aspiring to be? It means you're going to have a government that is very bad because it's run by bad people. Because good people have left the government to bad people and they run to private sector and run to the NGO sector. But yes, we have the interest to go to the government, but you can also, for people who have rational thinking, people who have moral thinking, doesn't want shortcut that I have to go to the bush for 6 months so that I come back as an undersecretary or a minister. No, there's a merits. Allow the system of merits to check its cost and to transform the process of building the state. But that particular rationale of where we're using merits to transform the state of South Sudan from where it's been fragile to actual state, the people who hold decisions right now are afraid of that process. That's what I'm saying. Absence of rule of law, it doesn't mean that we don't have instruments for rule of law. We have instruments. We have legislations, we have police act, we have all judicial, we have best laws. But the scholars are the one having the decision to implement them. What do you expect? That's my conclusion.
Thank you, Brother Edmund, for that. I will yield it back to Brother Nuri because we are left with less than 20 minutes in order to wrap it up. But before you comment on the issues of accountability, Brother Nuri, I need you also to comment on the incident of Mangala. What happened in Mangala was sad because we saw a video clip on social media and people were speaking in their language. And I'm privileged to be part of that community. I always understand Dinka language better. It was so sad that the people were traveling to Juba, or maybe they were traveling from Bor, coming to rescue, or also to take back people that were left on the ground of cattle camp during the night of attack by the local community of Bari and Mundari. And people were coming to take children and women, and then they will become the victims when they were actually on the way. So I need you to comment on that. And then my brother Edmund also will comment on it. And then each one of you will be having 2 minutes to make your last parting shot and your last message to South Sudanese who are listening to you. You are gentlemen of knowledge. You are gentlemen who are willing to give yourself for the benefit of South Sudan and to see the prosperous, peaceful, and development or devolved nation, and that is South Sudan. And Nuri, the chance is yours. Activate your mic.
Thank you, Brother Majuk and Brother Yakani. One of the useful things about having media is because media has no borders. Media can cross to any issue that is concerning humanity. What happened in the incident you referred to was very tragic. It still is tragic. And it could be a community issue that is affected, and it could be a national issue. And any citizen who care about South Sudan, humanity, would have to be concerned if these issues are happening within the country. You see, there are two tragic cases which shock the conscience of humanity. The Holocaust, when Jews were terminated, when Jews were not seen as people but object. The same thing when Hutu start to see Tutsi minority group, only 15% of the population or 14% of the population in Rwanda, Tutsi. So they're very minority in that sense. About 84% of the population in Rwanda, they are Hutu. So that's a large population. And because they wield so much power over the years, because they alternate power depending which group was in and which group is out, then the other group is start to use power against the other. So when they started to see Tutsi has people who are not people anymore, including the animal, because Tutsi, they actually rear the cattle. You have seen Paul Kagame with his cattle all the time. They wear the same color like your clothes that you have on. They tend to be brown. You have also seen that type of cattle with President Museveni as well, the Nyankoli, and in Western Uganda. So, and you can imagine how these, living creatures are so important to certain people. They are very important to Dinka as people in general, because people use them to establish families. People use them to make a living. And in a sense that if you have your cattle, you don't need anything from the government. People can cry in Juba, the inflation is up, the prices of goods, prices of food is up. But if you have your cattle, then you are pretty much living your life, and you don't expect any government to cover your medical care, to cover your children's schools. And they actually helped during the revolution. People use them for consumption. Soldiers use them for consumption to fight. You would think any soldier who would be knowledgeable about or who respect the history, evolution of the revolution, or the sustainability of the revolution, would be really honoring those people who are rearing cattle, but that was not the case. So you could see it that issues like that, they could be indicators of a much bigger catastrophe as far as nation is concerned. Because when people are getting angry at the national army or the national government, then you can imagine that the essence of law would be basically breaking down, and people would be living like in a jungle areas, which nobody is really liking to have that situation to be happening. So they're very important. You can even see that you call me Juk now. I believe that your dad, gave one of the very important bull to his in-laws, and that's why you became a joke. So they are not very easy. You have seen one guy calling his cattle name by name. They know them by name, and it's so important to them. And he was basically breaking down and crying. All right. So this is so tragic in a sense that you would never try to do that in a very humiliating way, and it just encouraged the entire society to believe in violence. When the government or the state is the one initiating the violence, then everybody else would be violent. So we need to make sure soldiers of the nation, national army, would be custodian of people's properties. That's how I would hope that people who did what they did would be held accountable, or even come forward and say what I did was wrong, and I'm here to apologize. And people are usually nice. They will forgive. When you come genuinely and apologize and give an honest apology to people that you have caused so much pain, you also have to know, Brother Majuk, these people, they are starting to to get back to their life, because some of these people were affected in the 90s and their cattle were raided. So they're starting to build their life. So, and to build life take long time. You know, it take long time to build it again, to put it together again, and become something that you can depend on. So to destroy it in a matter of a second, because of hard feeling, or because someone advise you to do so, is just wrong. I would hope they would be held accountable, or I would hope they would come forward and apologize to these people that they have affected so severely. And the pride of the country, people who travel all over the world to go to South Sudan, they love it, they admire them when they see them, and they could be one day be a source of income for the nation, and the nation could actually collect revenue on them when foreigners go from here and start to visit cattle camp. So people should see them as a source of wealth of the nation as well. These are what we call wealth of the nation. So nations should not just depend on one single wealth. Cattle are also wealth of the nation. Oil is wealth of the nation. Minerals are wealth of the nation, and its source of energy that is useful is the wealth of the nation. Now, what I would say in a very short insight is that you see, there has to be a group that is calling for accountability, whether it's civil society group that would be working hand in hand with the national power sharing government to put pressure on the power sharing government to accept the idea of the hybrid court, because this come back to why do people take arm and go and raid other communities? It's because they know the national government would not go after them. And it's because they know thy politicians are with them. And it's because they know they're representing them in Juba. Juba is the safest city now. It's like Khartoum. When war was raging on in the countryside, Khartoum was doing parties, flourishing, and going to schools, graduating. The same thing in Juba now. People are going to schools, people are graduating, people are doing parties, so Juba became Khartoum, so it's not being affected because it's heavily protected. You have seen during Christmas time how much national army was sent out to protect and to safeguard the entire city. So, but the countryside is burning and it's being destroyed. And Juba is not without politicians who represent people who are fighting in the countryside. There are people who are living in Juba, they're residing in Juba, and they're communicating hand in hand with people who are actually killing each other in the countryside. So somebody else would have to question the politics of accommodation. Because if the politics of accommodation is turning a blind eye to the accountability that is much needed, then somebody has to come forward and question this politics of accommodation. Because one thing that you would not want to have is when you have too many people without state. If you have too many people who are stateless, people who have no state, or if you have too many people who have no rights, people who are rightless, or people who have who should have right to have right but have no right to have right. All right, that exactly what caused Paul Kagame to take arm against the Hutu regime, because Paul was asked, "You do not need to come back. You need to go to Ethiopia. That's where you originally from." By people who control the state, Hutu. But Paul was also promised, because people would be promised in Uganda and say, "Hey, stay here. here, you will get properties, you will get land. But Paul was also promised by Museveni, his own friend, and said, look, fight with me. Let us kick out Idi Amin. Let us kick out these crazy guys. And when we actually captured the country and control the government, we would give you citizenship. You will be Ugandan. And Paul was pleased. He will have access to property. He will have access to land. And then when the country was liberated and Museveni became president, Museveni turned out he was no longer in charge of the parliament. The parliament came and said, no, we have to redefine citizenship. It should not be just if you are a refugee here, it should be if two or one biological parent were ancestors of this country before colonization. So that denied Paul Kagame to have citizenship, to have properties in Uganda, and Paul Kagame became stateless and rightless in Uganda, his own people. So he had a choice, but there was agreement. Just like what they are doing now in our country, agreement after agreement. So he asked himself, should I be stateless or should I be rightless? And he said, look, I must fight. So he went back and fight in Rwanda and captured the country. So the remedy he's doing now is to make sure that social services are remedy to people so that the absence of war would be peace across the country. So he's giving remedy so that people would focus on human development in a state of war. Now, it is the same thing. The reason why I'm saying this because genocide doesn't happen without indicators. The indicators that are happening in South Sudan now could be indicators of genocide. And this is tragic. The same thing in Uganda. You see, Museveni was not supposed to be president. He was not supposed to be fighting. He was an academician in Tanzania. But when people were being brutalized by Idi Amin, people call him and say, look, you either be a professor there and you will have no people living in Mumbrara. So he had to answer the question of whether to exist or not to exist. So he came back, and that's how he came back to Uganda. Now, the reason why I'm saying this because our people, politicians in Juba, they have to see this. When they see this thing happening, like the incident you have seen in Mangala, that was not supposed to happen. These are issues that telling us that common sense of morality is breaking down, and so many people would be angry. And when so many people are angry, then the notion of the state is no longer there. And we were given a question that a few years ago, or historically, that we Southerners, we will not be able to govern ourselves. So people who fought with us yesterday would interfere with our state in hope to get it back, in hope to destroy it, in hope to fling the country into genocide, and then somebody else would be able to take over the country. We don't want that to happen. We need to have our people, to ask our people to impose accountability. It doesn't matter whether it's from your community, whether it's your colleague, whether it's, you have to impose accountability and you have to move on. You cannot accommodate every single person who took arm in a wrong way against the state. You cannot accommodate somebody who literally called for violence or use his community to destroy humanity. You cannot accommodate that person. You have to put accountability on that person. And if you cannot try that person in Juba, then pick a country and then ask for help, and then pick a country. If you want to establish this hybrid court in Kenya, because that's historically SPLA has been there. If you want to take it to Uganda, you want to take it to Rwanda, you want to take it, pick a country and take these people to that country and call for a UN Security Council to help. And if somebody is using any source of communication to incite violence, then impose severe penalty on that person. There has to be accountability in order to stop violence, in order to stop these indicators of genocide. There has to be a point in which people would say, or the state would say, or the government would say, enough is enough. Otherwise, if we just accommodate any criminal who committed crime against humanity, then there is no way anybody who is coming behind will not be able to commit a crime against humanity and continue to enjoy freedom.
Thank you. You're done?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brother Nuri, for your well-articulated examples that are relevant to our situation, and for also condemning Mangala incident. It was very unfortunate indeed. In the month of May, I posted a clip, the incident that happened in Nigeria between Igbo and Fulani. When Fulani car were shot and people were telling Fulani, go back to your country, go back to your area or to your land rather. And I thought the things will only be in Nigeria. And I was shocked to see the clip where a South Sudanese shooting cattle, animals, very innocent. Those animals were so innocent and they became victim of something which they don't even know. When you see them on the ground with the pain from the bullet, you feel like shedding tears. As you mentioned earlier, the pastoralist community across the world, their pride is always in their animals, especially their cattle. And that's why they name people like us after cattle. And people like my brother Itmo Nyakani, they also have pride in their agricultural and their domestic animals and some of their cows. So it was so sad. And up to now, we have not had any condemnation information or any letter from our government. Then what do you think that such incident will not repeat itself tomorrow? Because I may kill Edmund Yakani cows today, just shoot them, at least to frustrate him. And if I'm not receiving condemnation from Nuri, aka Kwal, then what do you expect another person to do like Abraham did? Abraham will do the same thing tomorrow because there is no accountability, no anybody condemning what I have done, and I'm not even feeling that I've done something wrong. My instincts are not even telling me that what I have done is against humanity. So it was sad indeed. But the reason is always someone like Edmund has been talking and advocating for this thing to be addressed for the last 6 months. But I don't know what normally happened to our government. And when they come to public gathering, they always give us information that they also want this thing to end. But what's delayed all the process until this tragic happened? It was sad, Mr. Edmund Yakani. Give us your comments in regard to the Mangala incident where cows were shot and the cattle keepers who were coming to rescue their children and their elderly people were also shot by the army. Kindly, can you comment on that? And after that, you will give us your last parting shot, and then I will yield it back to Brother Nuri. Thereafter, we will end our conversation and we will look forward for meaningful and furthermore conversation in regard to the benefit and the future of South Sudan. Thank you.
First, the network is a bit disturbing. Am I clear to all of you? Anur and Majok?
Yeah.
Yes, you are crystal clear.
You know, the incident of Mangala, I've been closely following this incident right from Nimule, Mogale, on their way, Liria, Ngangala, you know, there's atrocities going on this area. Until now, the Dinkabora on their way, going back to board down the station in Mangala. And you can see the statement made by some of the leaders that these cattle are coming on their way back to board. Now, there are facts here that we need to accept the reality and we need to put the things right. And that tragedy really, we strongly condemn it because we don't expect a state agents to act in that manner. That they have acted, they acted wrong. And really, I'm one of the person who is ready to testify if there's any court of law on that incident because I have credible evidence that beyond doubt I can stand before the court. One, it's not all the pastoralists. Among the pastoralists, there are few individuals who are stubborn, who had a problem in controlling cattle's access to farms, and also who like to bully when they come across any village, taking people's goats or killing. You don't say all of them. And normally in society, there are people who are criminal-minded. And that's why what Anur was saying, the culture of rule of law, where I don't live in impunity, is important. So if I do today, nobody held me accountable, and my brother come and do tomorrow, our number grow. That's one trigger that happened. And that has caused a tension between the host community of the Bari and the pastoralists who are going. Atrocities were there. So there's exchange of guns between the cattle keepers and the Bari youth, and the exchange among themselves, like what has happened anywhere. And simply because the Bari feel they have been bullied, they have not been seen response from the state, so they have to confront the pastoralists. But that bully, it have nothing to do with the shooting of the cattle. It's more of like our traditional way, because even I'll tell you in Mangala, some of the Bari keep cattle. And next is Mundari who keeping cattle. So the value of the cattle is all to that particular community. But the tragedy comes when members of the state agents were on their way coming to Juba, and they found cattle on the way. And they know people who keep cattle. As you said, the value of the cattle is more important than the human being. So these forces, when they arrived, instead of also becoming disciplined and respecting the way, they want to drive in the middle of the cattle by force. And the youth was saying, please, allow us to open for you the way. Immediately, they exchange bullets. Who are they exchanging bullets? It is now the state agents and the cattle keepers. So that resulted to shooting of big number, the claim that we have seen going on, and become more painful that your state agent that is supposed to deter the tension between the pastoralist and the host community, you also again turn against one of the parties in the conflict. And it really is painful. You know, I'm somebody who think that one time when our generation become in a leadership, actual cattle is a good source of revenue. You know, my job, the way you keep your cattle, if I lay against it 2 pounds per each one of them, it's good money per day. As long as I can give them vaccination, I can care for their treatment, I can slaughter them. Well, this big way, people are estimating that one South is against 5 head of cattle. That's enough revenue. Even to be genuine to ourselves, and even to respect rule of law. But because the trigger is that when the cattle keepers are coming, there's absence of the state always. Let me be honest with you. What is the rationale of 10 people against 200 cattle in terms of control in the movement? It can't match, isn't it? So the state is supposed to be there to provide a pathways, how people move. And secondly, people always get misunderstanding. When people get misunderstanding, they still have to come and instill the culture of rule of law. So that little tension between the pastoralists and the host community have triggered the state agencies to become aggressive. And so for me, the tragedy of Mangala is a clear level of trauma that we have against each other. We are so much traumatized that I'll tell you, those cattle have been shot. It's supposed to be chickens. My friends, people even will waste bullets of AK-47, which was bought so expensive to shoot at chickens, because that's the way they shot the cattle can be shot at chickens if replaced. So it's actually even shooting the cattle with the bullet that was bought with dollars by itself is a waste of national wealth. What have we done at the end of the day? What have we done? Why don't you take it live and you go and maybe keep it somewhere than shooting it dead? So for me, the clear incident of Mangala is that the state is also playing a double standard. Now the state want to come and level other group that they're in charge of that, which they're escaping the reality on the ground. And I like what Anur say. The only pathway is people should come forward and apologize than creating another story to cover up the reality on the ground, what happened on the ground, that's which is not true. And secondly, the state must take its responsibility to mitigate the tension between the use of land for farming and the use of land for cattle keeping. And I have to be honest, guys, here. I'm one of the person who stand behind the three governors. During the governors forum, I brought Denai, Adel, and Lobong to meet with the leadership of the UNIMIS to agree on a joint project on how to really minimize atrocities that are happening. Look at what's happening in Ngangala, what's happening in Liria. Civilians are murdered, they are killed, civilians revenge. For how long? I told governors, take responsibility. Get down to the people. Create a system that makes them avoid violence. Because then they will interact. But if our interaction is creating violence, somebody else have to come and say, no, your interaction is now outside the law. So that is what is missing. And that's what brought Mangala. And now my worry is that if you hear the language that are coming from the pastoralists in Mangala, the common language is that, now government is rebelling against us. Government is seeing us as rebel. Let them tell us. If they don't want us here, let them tell us. And I'll tell you what's going on in Pibor might be another reflection of reactions. So likely Mangala is not going to die naturally. If the state doesn't take responsibility, apologize, the way how the state actors act, if the state cannot apologize also in the absence of its role in deterring violence, and secondly, if the leadership of the subnational government doesn't apologize for the failure in creating a pathway where people can coexist. Because you know, one of the things that I'm sharing with both of you, Noor and Majok, and the audience, is that our country every day is disintegrating into a communal state. It's no longer the state of the constitution. I'm speaking with you now here, where the problem in Tonch is. Ale was removed because of the continuous violence there. But even if you take the new governor, as long as you don't address the root causes that made people to continue violence, you cannot. Look at the case study of the Lex governor, Ring. You have to go to the root causes. Listen to the people, let people tell you. Don't assume that I know. This culture of leaders assuming they know is always a fact of failure. You're given leadership and you say, I know. No, go down to the people, listen, let them tell you. Sometimes what you know is you know the effects, you don't know the root cause. So all these violence that are going on, our leadership is always claiming they know, and they want to impose a solution that by itself is fueling for more violence. It's creating more crisis. So for me, that's my last comment about that Mangala is another expected challenge. And my worry is that it affects livelihood. And that road is a very tarmac road. The way mobility will be there is going to be tough. So my message is that I want to say is that really there's a need for the leadership in Juba, one, to stand up and respond to those crises in a genuine manner, in a sincere manner, and in a manner that without any political manipulations. That's my final conclusion. Coming to my brother Anur, we are champions of the access to justice. We pursued the establishment of the commission. They refused. We pushed until we were. So that's all the advocate. But the only thing is that I repeat myself. The people who we need to make decisions for justice and accountability to prevail are the same people who are afraid of making sure justice and accountability prevail. So we are dealing, like you're dealing with, you're asked to push a stone that is blocked with a bigger stone than what you are trying to push. But anyway, we don't give up. Because let me tell you, by the way, in human society, information and messaging by itself is an instrument of change. Like what we're doing now, this is an instrument of change, the way we are talking now. If you keep silent, it becomes worse. But when we talk, things will change. So we'll keep on calling for justice and accountability to prevail. So that tomorrow, future that comes after, I say, oh, at least 3 or 4 or 7 people have been calling, but their voice has not been heard. At least we'll maintain that. So that's really my concluding remarks, that I wish this pocket of violence can be. And my fear is this to all of you, even the listeners. My fear is if we don't respond genuinely to what's happening in Upper Nile, if we don't respond to genuinely what's happening in Pibor and Bor, if we don't respond genuinely to what's happening in Eastern Equatoria and Mangala now, and maybe in Tonj in Western Equatoria, the constitutional making processes and the elections are going to be violent. Because already the seeds of violence among communities planted and they have germinated. We are harvesting them now. And what my colleague Nur was saying, already what's happening in South Sudan is seeds of genocide. Look at what's happening in Gumuruk. What else can you can't qualify as a crime against humanity? Burning houses, burning food, shooting at population randomly, vulnerable children. What against that does not qualify as a genocide? Look at what's happening in Malakal, forcing people into the waters, they die of disease, you shoot them at the waters, the wounded one have no medical treatment. What else cannot describe genocide? Look at what happened in Mangala that you have seen. Because even clearing livelihood by itself is a murder. When you kill somebody's source of livelihood, it's a murder by itself. So what else doesn't describe itself? Already seeds of genocides have been seen in South Sudan. So I think for me, the political leadership needs to take responsibility. Unfortunately, we're speaking to political leadership that are so afraid of what is called justice and accountability, but will never remain silent. For me, silence is not the option. Thank you very much.
All right. So I can just say my brief final remarks, Brother Majux and Brother Edmund Yakani. These things they do have solution for them only if there is application of them. One of the things that some other countries used to regulate between freedom of movement, whether freedom of movement was on animals or freedom of movement of people, is to apply customary law that community leaders at countryside where cattle are being kept for grazing, and communities that are hosting cattle keepers, if there is a harmonious environment, those people, they would be able to discover a way to work between the state government, not the republic government, but the state government and the county government, with something we call local government, as you know. If those entities can work together, they can be able to find a solution. And indeed, if someone is not responsible for respecting any plantation of each individual, then that person in a situation of reality, you would be able to impose the law and actually hold that person accountable. The same thing, the host community do not want to take advantage of people who have left the native areas and in search of green patches, such that they can pretty much take advantage of them or abuse them, or even having a state to have a hand in abusing people because they just happen to be not from that particular area. I think both entities, the state government, the national government, the local government, the communities, hosting communities, can actually work together to make South Sudan a better place, a place where you can go to any place and be able to feel safe with your family, with your animal, and without any restriction, because we have a diverse country. Some areas, they do have vegetation that is so lucrative and useful for your livelihood, and some place they do not have vegetation that is needed by cattle in that sense. So we should work together to make sure we are safe in anywhere we happen to be. That's all I would say about nomadism and movement of people with cattle. I think the idea of pushing segregation and apartheid, something like that looked like apartheid, something that looked like segregation, really challenge us whether or not we appreciate the idea that it was killed in South Africa, that segregation and apartheid system was killed in South Africa. We should not be reversing back that we should segregate ourselves, that we should encourage apartheid system because it would make the country to look bad, to be a backward country. We should be believing in the rule of law and apply the rule of law because nobody should be above the law. Whether you are a high-profile politician, whether you are the president, vice president, a general, an average person, ordinary person, or a cattle keeper, you should not be above the law. We should be able to be under the law and treated equally under the law. But we should not be encouraging segregation and apartheid. I am never comfortable with the idea that that the last resort is go back to your native place, go back to your cradle land, because that would pretty much make the country to look so bad. Now, what I would say is people who call for accountability are not people who are enjoying or people who do not want accountability. It would be people from outside who see themselves as clean, who should be calling for accountability, whether they want to team up with some other international organization or some other regional organization that are interested in pushing for restorative justice or retributive justice, then those are the people who should be coming in and help people of South Sudan in order to save humanity. Otherwise, if there are no people who would be doing that, then South Sudan would be in violence for a very long time, and the idea of election would be a distant thing. Now, we don't have opposition. Usually opposition would be the one crying every now and then to call for democratization of the country, because democratization of the country would be actually calling for accountability and calling for civil liberties and calling for human rights. But right now we don't have a serious civilian politician that would be welcomed by the current power sharing government without being intimidated. So I can understand that. If you happen to go to Juba now and start to conduct rallies on human rights violation, the next day you would be arrested. Quilag was just released recently. The leader of the how do they call it? Civil uprising movement just released recently. So I can understand that people can easily be arrested. But I think people have to negotiate with the current power sharing government and say, should you continue to do this and then have country on the path of catastrophe, or should you begin to be open-minded about people who are calling for human rights to be respected? I think human rights apply to everybody, including politicians who are in power, apply to every single property in Juba. Because if you destroy humanity, politicians are not exception. People can get killed. President of Rwanda, what set a country at blaze was because two presidents were killed. The president of Burundi and president of Rwanda was killed. Habyarimana was killed, and because people didn't know who killed him, who murdered him, who shot down the plane. Up to now, it's still mysterious. So people have to contract has to be negotiated. Contract of human rights. Human rights has to be accepted. People should not be allowed to be accommodated and then continue to brutalize the people. Now, even this country, Kenya, Brother Majuka and Brother Yakani, even Kenya, in 2007, the country just went into a serious violence. So they were displaced to Uganda. 1960s, 1970s, Ugandan were displaced to Sudan. The same thing in Rwanda. So this massive population in Ethiopia, 1990s, many of us were in Ethiopia, we were flushed out. All right. So there's no safe haven in these countries. Any political violence can happen in these countries. Then what would happen if we are not putting our house in order? So we're living temporarily in those countries, but those countries are not immune to violence. So we have to work very hard, work together, so that we can go back to our country and take a break and invest in development and invest in education and invest in healthcare and make the country to be a model of Rwanda, which everybody is desiring now, you know, model of Botswana, which everybody is desiring now. Country very rich, can develop very fast, and people can be quite wealthy in South Sudan. So the idea that you have your family in Uganda, you have your family in Kenya, family in Ethiopia, family in these neighboring countries, it's never safe. It's never safe. So we have to accept the idea. But I think it's going to come down to negotiating with the power sharing government to accept the idea of the hybrid court and begin to hold people accountable. If we cannot do it, then we have to put the government to select a country where accountability would be established, where retribution would be established, and start to punish people who committed crime. So I will stop there, but it's a very serious issue. But it's an issue that Lagos State media has brought into discussion, and I'm looking forward to have more insight on anything that come up on Lagos State next time. But I do appreciate Brother Mijuk and Brother Yakani, and I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hopefully we will be able to have a just and fair society, South Sudan, one day.
Thank you so much, my brother Nori. Edmond Yakani, do you have anything to comment before we end our conversation?
I don't have any comment. Just my comment is that let's keep on building the culture of being nationalists for the nation, because that's the common good that we have. We may disagree, but disagreement, we can't sort it out through violence. Always, how much we disagree in human society, dialogue is the best way.
Thank you so much. First of all, permit me on behalf of Lagos State Media to appreciate our viewers for standing there and tuning in despite the challenges. If you tune in South Sudan, we understand MTN is not also exceptional. It's robbing people on daily basis with the MBs and bundles. The rate is so high. And if you ask them, they will tell you that the taxes has also been raised on them. So thank you so much for spending your time to listen to the voice of reasoning from these two gentlemen. And I hope their informations and their thoughts, their wisdom might have changed how you see South Sudan and how you see things differently. And through conversation, that's where we'll get to know each other. And through conversation, that's where we'll get to know things that we don't know before from other fellow South Sudanese. We all have solutions within our midst as the people of South Sudan, but we don't know how to utilize our power in order to address our problems before we run to Entebbe, before we run to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, before we run to Khartoum. Thank you so much. Keep tuning in to Lagos State Media. It is our mandate as one of the media platform to bring guests to the studio to share their thoughts, their wisdom with you. Some of them, you will not realize them now. The information these two gentlemen speak, you will not see them now, but you will see them next year, or you will see them before election, because they have tight things to do with the election. If we don't put our house in order now, then the elections will be a nightmare, and it'll be illusion in our mind as South Sudanese. To our guests, thank you so much. Mr. Edmund Yakani, we are grateful as Lagos State Media for always coming to us and share your thoughts with us and also update us about the fresh ideas, the first-hand information on the ground. And to my brother, Kwal Garang, thank you so much. I'm really honored to share the platform with you today on Lagos State Media. And I know that you are our usual guest, only that time is spent did not allow you to come and share your wisdom and experience with South Sudanese. And we all need to know that South Sudanese are in their need of information than ever. At this critical time, anybody of you who have information about experience in East Africa region, in Africa continent, and also in other part of the world, South Sudan needs that information in order to judge their current affairs and correlate them with other countries. And through that, we might be having a clear picture on where we want South Sudan to be in the global table of affairs. May God bless you all. May God bless South Sudan, and may God bless Africa. Thank you so much.
It's your boy Young Love, I give him that time. Pancho Lagos State, Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Pancho Lagos State, Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Ban Wokoji Lake, Kankaro Watana watching, Oga level leg, Juir Pow, Garay Lake, Panda with Yae, Panchi America, Banya Dwal, Vano, Chingatongo Pandon, Kujura by a check out, Paku Panda Juir, what they be Dwal venting. State Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Pancho Lagos State Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Ban Wokoji Lake, Kankaro Watana watching, Oga level leg, Juir Pow, Garay Lake, Panda with Yae, Panchi America, Panya Dwal Vano, Chingatongo Pandon, Kujura by a check out, Paku Panda Juir, what they be Dwal venting.